I think of my love for Canada as being very rational. I think of my love for Jamaica as being somewhat emotional.
Being Jamaican Canadian helps me to be wide-eyed.
It's the best place that offers a cultural mosaic way of living.
You can be Canadian and still be Jamaican. You can be Canadian and still be Bajan. You can see so much being in Canada.
I'm Jamaican by birth, Chinese by heritage, but Canadian by choice.
Canada gave me the opportunity to take what would have been a statistical improbability and make it a reality. That's what Canada means to me.
August 6th, 1962. That was the day a little island with big spirit declared its independence from centuries of British rule. With hope, faith, and big dreams for its future, Jamaica unified under its national motto, out of many, one people. Like many Jamaican Canadians, Jamaican Torontonians, they proudly live with a foot in two worlds, but share one love for both Canada and their beloved homeland. There's no doubt Jamaica's economy has struggled since its independence, but Jamaica's contribution to Canada and the world has been priceless. From jerk chicken to rum, sugar and spice to dub poetry, from coffee to dance hall, and from ackee and saltfish to Marley. Jamaica is known for many things. One of them is producing world-class athletes.
Bolt now with his strides in full gait.
Ben Johnson is going to win the gold. Johnson beats Lewis the time. 9.84. Bailey moving up. Donovan Bailey moving up in the middle. He's the gold medalist world champion in a time of 5.97. Donovan Bailey has fulfilled his dream.
When Donovan Bailey won his gold medal in the 1996 Olympic Games, I was 16. I remember him crossing the finish line, and that moment when he did, I remember that so much, and just jumping up and down and being so excited and feeling so proud that a Canadian, we beat all the Americans, and we did it. We finally did it, and so we all got to share a little bit in what he accomplished. We were so very proud of him. I was born in Toronto, Ontario. I first got into track and field because of my brother, who loves it and still does to this day. Growing up, there weren't a whole lot of role models that had any of the same experiences that I had. In 1998, as a little girl, and you're watching these behind-the-scenes specials with Ben Johnson, and his mom talks like my mom, and his grandmother sounds like my grandmother, and he's Canadian, and so am I.
Ben Johnson is going to win the gold.
And so I remember I was in the family room, running around our coffee table with my hand up like this because he did it. The aftermath was sad.
Disqualification of this competitor from the games of the 24th Olympiad in Seoul.
Still, that moment for me is still something I have to be grateful for anyway. I actually did end up receiving a scholarship to the United States. Was doing track and field there, and I always hoped that track and field would be the platform on which I could stand.
Shelly Ann's athletic career was about to take an unexpected turn when she was recruited for a very Canadian sport.
Bobsleigh recruits from track and field and sports like rugby and soccer quite often because of that speed and power and agility and explosiveness. I think that the skills that I acquired by doing track and field translate almost seamlessly to bobsleigh.
Before long, Shelly Ann's track skills would lead her and pilot Helen Upperton to a third-place standing with one run to go at the 2010 Vancouver Winter Olympics, with a chance to make Canadian history.
And I'm looking around and trying to take in this moment like, I'm at the Olympic Games, I remember standing at the block and trying to not be nervous and shaking my arms and legs and just seeing the sea of thousands of people lining the entire mile of the track. Every once in a while in an athlete's life, you have this moment of just sort of complete clarity where everything just sort of comes into focus. I suddenly just thought about all of the training that I had done that year and all of the running I had done in my whole entire lifetime and all the recesses I raced boys for fruit roll-ups, all the sacrifices I had made. I just remember thinking about all of that and recognizing that I don't have to be nervous. I'm standing right where I have wanted to be for my whole entire life. I remember just putting everything into it. Every time we came out of a corner, I could hear the crowd going, ah! And I was like, oh man, this is intense. We were going up the braking stretch and we had an amazing run. It was braking so hard. And I just started beating Helen's helmet and I was like, yeah! And it was just pandemonium. Like, we were so excited.
It was a double victory for Team Canada, finishing first and second. Shelly Ann Brown became the first ever Jamaican Canadian woman to win a Winter Olympics silver medal.
I could see my dad. The crowd was actually lifting him up, like they were picking him up, and I'm like, my goodness, like my dad is crowd surfing. This is amazing. I'm sure when they first decided, when he was 20 and decided, like, I'm gonna move to Canada, he never thought my dad is gonna bobsleigh and go to the Olympics. It's the epitome of what Caribbean immigrant dreams of, that your children will grow up and be able to be successful in whatever they choose and to be successful to the highest level, and that your sacrifices, and there were many, were worth it.
My parents have made a ton of sacrifices. I mean, from my mom being able to prepare breakfast for me at 5 a.m. when I got to go to hockey practices, and my dad being able to get up every morning to put water on the backyard rink to make sure that it's ready for us. I mean, those sacrifices not all parents can make.
And brother, did he line up that hit? That's the toughest we've seen so far.
Unless I had exposed them to hockey, I don't think they would come to me and say, Daddy, I want to be a hockey player.
Subban is the favorite of the crowd here in Montreal. And brother, did he line up that hit?
I was born in Jamaica, in Clarendon, in Vere, Portland Cottage. We came to Canada in 1970-71, so I sort of grew up in Sudbury. In those days, 2 channels, French and English, and that's how I was introduced to the Montreal Canadiens. I remember sitting in the family room there, and he said, Daddy, I want to be like those guys on TV. That was music to my ears. As soon as first snowfall, the boards went up, the skates went on, and the game began.
This is PK, the older brother, and he's playing hockey, and the day you were born.
The younger they are when they start something, the better it is. It's easier for them to learn a skill. It's easier to train those muscles and to train those habits in the mind and so on.
My father putting myself in hockey and putting Malcolm and Jordan in hockey, I'm sure it wasn't the easiest decision for them to make, considering the amount of money and time that it commands. And when you have 5 kids especially, it's not easy, you know, trying to feed all these kids and then give them equipment even though they're growing still, and, you know, doing all those things. I mean, these hockey sticks nowadays, they're like $300, $400 just for a stick. Not a lot of people can afford that.
We did not buy that new car. We did not purchase the new furniture because, you know, the children are #1 in our hearts, in our minds, and in our lives.
If you want your kids to be successful, you got to put the time in, and you got to spend that time with your children.
Sport is like that other parent. And I think that our 5 kids, they have me, they have Maria, but they also, you need that other parent because you can't teach them everything. And I think sports is a wonderful parent. I attended Lakehead University. I sort of went there to get an education, also play basketball. On Saturday mornings, we had to work at the Lakehead Abitibi Price basketball camp for young kids. And I started doing that, and I said, wow, I mean, I love it. I love working with children. Not so much teaching basketball, but I loved working with children. And I knew then that this is what I want to do.
My dad was my principal for a few years. Big Carl, they call him. Really strict, really hard on me especially.
I've benefited from that a lot just because he found ways to get me to work hard and develop a work ethic, and even when I maybe didn't want to at a young age, he found ways to make sure that I understood the importance of doing that.
I remember one year I had a big nickel tournament in Sudbury, and my grades weren't up, and my dad said, unless you get your grades up, you're not going. So that's when it was clear to me that I had to put as much effort into school as I put into hockey.
I really believe that as parents that we have to dream first for our children, especially when they're young. The older they are, the more independent they become, they will dream. But when they're young, you know, it's important that parents dream for them, and then you need to then hand off the dream to them, and hopefully they'll take it. And we're very fortunate that our kids took it. Malcolm was just drafted, so he hasn't played in the NHL yet, and Jordan, who knows if he'll get there, you know what I mean? So we don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but we're very happy that they're doing well in their profession. I call it their profession. It's not their life, it's their profession.
He always says it's good that you guys are successful in hockey, but you have to be successful in life too. Doesn't matter how good you are as a player, you just have to stay grounded and just treat everybody else the way you want to be treated.
So many kids that play hockey in the world, and to know that my brother was selected in the top 2 goalies in the world is pretty significant. And for 2 parents that come from the Caribbean, you know, to migrate to Canada and have 2 boys that have been drafted in the NHL, it's pretty significant.
At the heart of the next great Canadian hockey family lies an understanding of the importance of education and self-belief, a message that Principal Subban tries to instill in hundreds of students every day.
My Jamaican upbringing made me realize how important education is. Education is in fact a game changer. It's all about access to opportunity. It levels the playing field. But it can also be a huge barrier if you don't have it. I was born in Kingston, Jamaica. My summer vacations were spent in areas like Trenchtown, teaching children to read and write. I loved it because I think this was one of my first opportunities to learn how fortunate I was. I came to Canada in 1976 with my husband Chris and our 2 sons, and I was determined that Canada was going to be good for us and we were going to be good for Canada.
As a systems analyst working at Scotiabank in Toronto, Marianne climbed the corporate ladder, becoming a senior vice president in 1998.
You know, I didn't actually realize it was a big deal when I became a vice president at 38 years of age. In looking back, I guess it was a reasonably big deal.
Being one of the first Black female VPs in Canada was just the beginning of a natural-born leader's career.
With a background as a bank vice president, Marianne Chambers put everything on the line in politics.
When people would suggest that I should get involved in politics, I would tell them they were confusing me with someone else. 2003 was an election year, and I was approached by the party and asked to run. And I really said yes because a lot of us are not invited to the table, and there is nowhere else that has the kind of reach in terms of the ability to impact people's lives other than government.
Mary Ann V. Chambers becomes the Minister of Training, Colleges and Universities, and I ask Minister Chambers to please come forward to take the oath.
Elected to office in 2003, Chambers went on to become Minister of Child and Youth Services in 2005 and continued to focus on children's education, even after her political career was over.
When I left the government, I was approached by several organizations that wanted me to get involved with them. And it was my opportunity to choose organizations that I was passionate about. PACE stands for the Project for the Advancement of Childhood Education. PACE is a reflection of my love for the little children of Jamaica. I think they're the most adorable children in the world. We support schools that are predominantly in extremely poor communities, typically attended by children whose parents can actually not afford to pay for their education. The meal that they will get at school is probably their main meal for the day. The children do not know they're poor yet. They are happy, they're in their school uniforms. They don't think it is odd at all that they do not, in a lot of cases, have proper sanitary facilities. They're just the most loving in the world. I always want my focus to be that the world is a better place because I lived. I know I have been living up to that, but I'm not done, and it's a labor of love.
It was a shared pride in Jamaican community and culture that turned one man's dream into a legendary Toronto landmark.
Who'd paint their walls black? Who would call their business the real jerk? I said, you believe in it, stick to it, and we did, and here we are today.
Infused in the aroma of jerk spices is a true immigrant success story.
I was born in Kingston, Jamaica 56 years ago. I met a beautiful woman there, and I knew my life was with her.
He gave me a ride to school, and then it grew from there.
When I came back to Canada a few years later, I got tired of working at General Motors and went out one day and just found a restaurant.
Restaurant? Are you crazy? Like, we don't have any money. We can barely pay our mortgage.
I mean, we were seriously broke, you know, and I told in the beginning, we got to invest our time and our personalities. The money will come.
Sometimes we made only $20 for the day. But he said, Lily, don't give up. If we work hard at this, we will be successful.
She believed me. I want to hit the 5 senses as much as possible. So it's a dining experience. It's not just filling a belly. You're going to hear the music, you're going to smell the smells, and I want to represent my culture positively.
After 23 years of building their family business, Ed and Lily returned to Toronto from a well-deserved vacation, only to be greeted with some shocking news from their landlord.
My manager at the time actually got the eviction notice. So when she called me and told me about it, I was in shock. We had a good relationship with my landlord until we got that letter stating that the building was sold, which was the day that we were told we have 30 days to move out.
Oh my Lord, what are we gonna do?
I had staff and their families to think of. So I just had to say, okay, that's it, that's the way he wants it. And I had to pick myself up. Tonight, we'll be doing dinner as usual and having a party, and that will be the last night.
With the party winding down and the celebration coming to a close, Ed and Lily felt disheartened.
I still can't believe it. You know, it's like when you have a loved one and you lose them. It's just like finally sinking in that, yes, and so the end is near, you know, but it's not over until it's over.
It'll be sad to leave this place, but I feel that we've had a good run here, and it is time to move on. When I turn that key in the lock, I think I'll be pretty choked up. So I'll be sad, but I'll be looking forward to starting work on the new place.
Every time we go to the studio, I get mad. When I get mad, I spoke Jamaican. I was like, leave me. I don't want everyone to know I speak funny in the record. Jamaican. I'm the Jamaican. I'm the Jamaican.
When my father heard I wanted to become a filmmaker, he was like, "But that's lazy man's work."
Victims, I need ambulances.
I kind of made me even want to more become a filmmaker because I knew I was going to prove him wrong.
Lightfoot, you a cop now, man?
In the heart of Toronto sits an award-winning filmmaker who sees the world through his own lens.
My parents met in England. They came there from Jamaica, fell in love, got married, and they moved to Canada. And that's where I was born. The first big short film that I did was called My Father's Hands. So I tried to dramatize my relationship with my father, and that had to do with a Jamaican immigrant who was a butcher, and his son, who was a vegetarian and also a dancer, so they were polar opposites. The story tells a story of the relationship of the father and son in 5 flashbacks, each having to do with his father's hands. My wife in university, we both went to York University. She was doing her public policy administration. She wasn't even doing film. I said, hey, we want to hang out while I make this movie. And she did, and she just liked it.
I was packing one of these like 5 years ago. I ain't gonna be carrying no bull piece. I need some freaking Eastwood. You know what I'm saying? Let that out in people's mouths dry up.
We've gotten a lot of support in this country. I think the films that we choose to make are films that we think really deserve to be told, and also told by us. We want to put our point of view out there because we felt like, you know, it wasn't being reflected on screen. Just to be able to actually work in the arts is a very happy thing. Like, I mean, I'm really happy I'm able to do this.
Although Jamaica has given the world many gifts, its biggest contribution has always been music. A gift that would inspire a young woman from the Jane and Finch area in Toronto who would help pioneer an entire Canadian music movement.
Being Canadian is just that freedom of being who you want to be. In 1976, I came down here. My mom is an RN nurse. Everybody wanted to be a nurse or a teacher in Jamaica, so she followed through with that, and I was her little handbag, and off we went to invade Canada.
Although she grew up surrounded by reggae, Michelle McCulloch fell in love with hip-hop at the inception of the art form. And it wasn't long before producers recognized her talent and started making records.
I'll make this real short and step right to you. What I'm gonna do, you know what's gonna do you.
Every time we go to the studio, I'd get mad. When I get mad, I spoke Jamaican. When I spoke Jamaican, they said, put it in the rhyme.
Push up your one if you want Jamaican, none. You know your back, you can't take the sun long.
I was like, leave me. I don't want everyone to know I speak funny in the record. And Ivan Berry convinced me to use that energy that I had in the studio and put it on wax, and we trapped it, and literally it was wax. Ivan Berry was the first to understand my accent and the energy that I wanted to put into music, so he just made me fearless.
What's going on? What's going on, woman?
Some of my influences were Bob Marley and Jimi Hendrix. I had a big love for guitar. And the message of Bob Marley, a one love theory that just wasn't reflected in hip hop music, so it let me write in another direction.
I'm the queen of self-esteem, no sweat the cream, to set the scene, get scream like how you mean, straight up, when the message game, ain't no puppet on a string.
And then it was easier to write because his message just coming from a woman gave me such a unique perspective. But how do you have so much reggae influence and want to be a hip hop artist? Ragadeth offered me an opportunity to come in and do that reggae person again, the same toasting that I was doing in doing hip hop. It was the same thing I added, but we just added guitars and the structure of rock music.
Do it and do it and do it. Just do what you gotta do. Do it, y'all.
Being Canadian means freedom and security. You can enjoy the atmosphere, the benefits, and you can also be a part of your culture. I just think Canada has been very, very rooted in culture, period.
As much as Toronto's cultural diversity influenced Michie Mee, her impact as the first Canadian rapper to get a US record deal has sparked more than just a few artists.
The most important Jamaican living in Canada to me is probably Michie Mee. If it wasn't for a Michie Mee, there wouldn't be a Cardinal. From when I was a youth, she allowed me to feel pride, you know what I mean, in really expressing my culture and letting people know where my roots are.
As one of Canada's greatest musical exports, Cardinal Offishall proudly infuses his Jamaican heritage into his hip-hop style. He prides himself on being an ambassador for the city of Toronto on a global stage.
I come from an era where Cardinal, back in my younger days, when my music was not as nice as it should have been, T-Dot crowds let you know that.
The reason I think why I love Toronto, and like I've been to most of the major cities across the world, I think it's the best place that offers a cultural mosaic way of living.
As I go all around the world and I represent nothing but this place that we call the T-Dot, always keeping it hot from Scarborough to the west end. You don't know that's the best head. Everything in between from region all the way up to Vaughan, you don't know what's going on. Can I get a gun finger in the air right
Jamaicans
now?
are the same anywhere they go on the planet. And that goes for people born there, it goes for people of Jamaican heritage. There's Jamaicans everywhere. Culturally, we've always been one of the most wealthiest nations in the world. The amount of money that people have made off of our culture over the last 50 years is outstanding, it's tremendous. I would have liked for economically Jamaica to be a lot more stronger and been a heavier force to reckon with, just in terms of everything that we have to offer.
Turns out there's a Jamaican Canadian entrepreneur who is determined to do just that.
When we took the bank over, I'd never run a bank before. I thought, oh my gosh, I feel like the dog who was chasing the car. No, Mr. Dog, now that you've caught the car, what are you gonna do with the car? In life, we are measured by our differences, not our samenesses. I was born in Port Antonio, Jamaica, the cradle of tourism in the Caribbean. My mom is an orphan, and she had me when she was a teenager. My stepfather, they met at a supermarket. Both parents had to hold on 3 jobs to sustain 9 children. At age 10, I started to think about not being a clerk in the supermarket, but wanting to own the supermarket. After high school, I had to work for me to go to university. So I thought, I'm gonna work for 1 year, and I'm gonna save $2,000. My goal was to apply to universities outside of Jamaica. If I wasn't successful, I was gonna take the $2,000 and buy a Triumph TR7 sports car.
In 1970, Michael was accepted to McMaster University, where he completed his engineering degree. He returned in 1976 for business courses as a prelude to his MBA.
So at the same time, at night, I would be a bouncer at the local student pub. So this particular night, my friend from university, he came and said, Mike, tonight I made $400. That's 160 hours of bouncing. So I thought, whatever he's doing, I'm gonna check it out.
Turns out his friend was selling mutual funds on the frontier of the mutual fund era. And at the age of 26, Michael became a financial advisor.
In my situation as a financial advisor, one has to look the part of credibility, and you have to give people a sense they can trust you. So I went out in 1983 and bought a Rolls Royce. And the thought was I would be a high curiosity factor, and people would want to know, what do you do? And that was my entree, leading to, here's what I do, and here's how I can help you.
In 1983, Michael borrowed $500,000 to buy stocks in Mackenzie Financial. In 4 years, his investment appreciated 7-fold, and in turn, he used the profits to acquire a small Ontario-based investment firm called AIC Limited. And the rest, as they say, is history. Within 20 years, AIC has grown to surpass $9 billion.
My trajectory wasn't just a linear trajectory upwards. It's fraught with pitfalls. When times are tough, I always remember the Chinese definition of the word crisis. Crisis equals danger plus opportunity.
In March of 2002, an economic crash presented Michael with the opportunity to buy the National Commercial Bank of his home country. An opportunity not only for financial gain, but for personal reward.
When Mike talked to me, he said, Aubin, it's not just to run the bank. We are going home to build a better Jamaica.
When we took the bank over, I'd never run a bank before. I thought, oh my gosh, I feel like the dog who was chasing the car. No, Mr. Dog, now that you've caught the car, what are you going to do with the car? And I thought, what is the highest value added this bank can give to the country, Jamaica? Solve Jamaica's problems. Well, the solution is to make the country wealthier. To create wealth, you have to make sure that you reinvest and compound your profits. And number two, you have to make sure you reinvest and compound human capital. In other words, you're going to keep your best and brightest at home. My commitment was we will not repatriate 1 penny of dividend. We'll take that dividend and reinvest it in the country to create more opportunities.
What you're feeling here today is the energy, the passion that's going to make this company preeminent in the world. That's what you're feeling here today.
So today, 10 years later, the #1 bank in Latin America, Central America, and the Caribbean was the National Commercial Bank of Jamaica. Measured against all banks in the world, we were 14th in the world. What is most fulfilling is that bank is an indigenous bank run by Jamaicans. If you put country first and we all hold together and honestly, it will be remarkable as to what would happen in the next 5 years and next 10 years.
Michael Lee Chin isn't the only Jamaican-born Canadian with big dreams for his home country. Another member from the mutual fund frontier has quietly and graciously become one of Canada's leading philanthropists in the areas of education and health.
I have more than what I could even spend in a lifetime. There are always people in need, and one of my main objectives is to make the world, the community, society, a better place by helping others. I was born in Kingston, Jamaica, 1948. I have 9 sisters and 2 brothers. And you learn how to share. I look at family as being more than a single unit. My father said, if so many of you, no matter how much I'm worth, when you divide it by 12, it's not going to be much. But what I can give you is all the education each of you would want.
A former University of Toronto engineering graduate, Raymond became a chartered accountant and eventually one of the original founders of CI Financial. Currently, he is regarded as one of Canada's most generous and covert philanthropists.
On the philanthropy side, obviously there are 2 sides to it, Jamaica and Canada. And the common thread has been education and health. In Canada, Ryerson and UHN, Toronto General, Western, and Princess Margaret. And the most recent has been the Herbert Hoppincong Center for Excellence in Education and Practice. Dr. Hoppincong has a lot of knowledge accumulated over the years. He is a doctor's doctor.
Oslerian refers to the philosophy about medicine of a great Canadian physician known as Sir William Osler. He actually was one of the best examples of how to practice the art of medicine. And I think the Oslerian approach has been to look at the whole person to think of a patient as an individual rather than a statistic. And I think it has to do with developing the sense of empathy, which means understanding what the patient's problem is and being willing to do something about it. I was born in a place called Summerfield, Clarendon. Came to Canada about 30 years ago. I think I was 32 years old, and I went to Montreal first, to McGill University. And I came to Toronto, and one of my jobs as we sort of formed the University Health Network eventually was to merge Toronto Western Hospital and Toronto General Hospital. And what I knew from my training and my work in Jamaica was that you need to replenish the staff there. And together with the chairman of medicine there, with Dr. Owen Morgan, we started about 20 years ago a program to bring specialists from Jamaica to do subspecialty medicine. Since that time, we have brought something like 24 of these physicians from the Caribbean. We have trained them in 2-year fellowship specifically for leadership and consulting and teaching jobs back in the Caribbean.
I'm Dr. Tamara Thompson, and I actually started working at the Toronto Western Hospital in January, where I'm doing a fellowship in general internal medicine.
My name is Handel Emery. I'm a first-year cardiology fellow here at the University Health Network.
My name is Dr. Corey Ford. I'm from the island of Barbados. I'm currently in the Department of General Internal Medicine and rotating through infectious disease.
With the help of the Raymond Yang Fellowship, I was able to come here to pursue a 1-year fellowship in renal pathology, which is the diagnosis of medical diseases in the kidney.
Presently, there are 11 of these doctors who are trained at UHN, who are teaching, practicing, and leading Institute in Jamaica.
With a deep love for both his worlds, Dr. Herbert Ho Ping Kong has become one of Canada's proudest teachers in the field of medical education and the Auslerian philosophy of medicine.
I hope to be remembered as a physician who truly believed in the philosophy that the art of medicine is just as important as a science and technology. And I hope to be remembered as someone who has taught and guided something like 6,000 students, and that they are practicing in a similar fashion.
Who amongst us carries the sage secrets of loving? Jamaica, I cannot promise to love you fearlessly. And forgive me for not having loved you relentlessly, because in all cases, fear has been my worst enemy. Dub poetry is a performance poetry that's rooted in reggae music, as in it emerges from there, but doesn't stop there. That's not a boundary. Dub poetry involves the entire body, and it believes that in order to engage your audience, you've got to give everything that you have in terms of facial expressions, in terms of physical movement, and in terms of energy that's constantly being transferred from the storyteller to the audience, and vice versa. Dub poetry is determined to represent the working masses, and it's determined to represent people, and it's determined to represent life. I was born in Kingston, Jamaica, to one of the pioneer dub poets, Anita Stewart. And we lived in what's considered to be the ghetto. Because of growing up working class, I ended up participating in all these other imaginative, creative scenarios because we couldn't sit down and watch TV. Jamaica being a country that's filled with Africans who were brought there through the transatlantic slave trade, all the oral traditions were brought along with them. I grew up watching storytelling come alive all around, because what's considered here to be performance art, the way I grew up, it was all around, When I came to Canada in 1993, when I was 15, I came right into the Fresh Arts program. My mother was running a multidisciplinary arts program that was geared towards youth of color. So for the first 3 years of being in Canada, I had this arts grounding. How amazing.
Yeah, my body need attention. Tour of my under stress, don't mention. Tomorrow, I have a next show.
Dancing and performing on stage are extensions of poetry. They're poems in another sense. I really feel like being a poet, moving into monodrama is again the logical conclusion, because poetry is so theatrical and it also gives me an incredible amount of creative control so that my work can remain political. Dear Jamaica, who amongst us carries the sage secrets of loving? Where are our elders, our children? The ones who walk with the old-time knowledge of a healing love, an unapologetic love, an uncompromising love, an honest love. If you tell me who, I will sit studently by the rivers of their feet, washing away all the unknowings that I have come to know, relearning a language of integrity and compassion and honesty, because these languages were carved on our hearts' tongues by ancient ones who somehow, somewhere, sometime, we have forgotten. Jamaica, I cannot promise to love you fearlessly. And forgive me for not having loved you relentlessly, because in all cases, fear has been my worst enemy. Fear of ghetto youths, fear of women, fear of men, fear of liberation, fear of queers, fear of self. Fear has been my worst enemy. But you know what, Jamaica? I can love you courageously. Because this love, our love, is a healing love, rebranching itself like the roots of the Iroko tree in an ancient, enchanted, magical forest whose arms are outstretched to the promise of tomorrow. Jamaica, here, now, today, you and I and we, the community, we can choose to stand firm in a love, in one love, Jamaica. We have many reasons to celebrate in Jamaica. We celebrate surviving the transatlantic slave trade. We celebrate surviving centuries of oppression in a new homeland. We celebrate surviving ostracization and exile. What has changed in Jamaica and what has not changed?
We got the world's fastest men and women and groups of men and women running. There's no reason, why we shouldn't be the smartest.
Jamaica isn't perfect, but we're trying to, struggle and find our own way. The system that's in place is not necessarily our system, but we're working with it.
When we took over management of Jamaica, we had a country where I could have saved enough money to go to university. Unfortunately, today, that same opportunity is not available to young Jamaicans.
When 55% of your expenditures go toward servicing debt, how much is left? So, private sector has to contribute.
Being a physician, I'd hope for Jamaica that we will develop a system in medical care that's appropriate for its citizens.
Jamaica 50 is learning what was supposed to happen and what is the new generation coming with.
There's some things that I'm happy about and there's some things that I'm not happy about.
It's just a time for reflection and introspection. It's a time to reignite our aspirations. It's a time for us to look at each other, be honest, and start thinking Jamaica first.
Happy 50th anniversary, Jamaica. I love you.
Happy 50th, Jamaica. Me love you.
Big up yourself. You don't know, sir. We've been in it a long time.
A happy 50th and many more to come.
Happy 50th anniversary, Jamaica.
Happy 50th, Jamaica.
Happy 50th, Jamaica.